In this episode, we have a lot of fun changing a clutch on a 2000 Celica GTS and talk about where it came from.
These two threads holding that in. I don't think it's gonna fall on me.
Ouch! It's got hit in the eyeball with an ABS sensor. The story of the Cupcake Delivery Express starts with a 2004 Mazda RX-8 with a few engine problems. A month later, I found out the entire engine was the problem. I was able to trade it for a red Celica, which 3 months later found out the entire engine was the problem in that car. I was able to find a wrecked Celica GTS, swap the engine out in about 19 hours with a lot of help from a lot of friends. And what amazes me about this car is this engine. It's an aluminum head with an aluminum block, and this fat idiot can pick it up and carry it like a box of groceries from Costco. The problem with the swapped-in engine was the clutch was bad in it. I was able to milk it for about 4 months, but it got to the point where it wasn't going any farther. I started on this 2 nights ago. Got it up on jack stands. Started taking it apart before it started to snow. So even though I swapped this engine and transmission a few months ago, I think to start with, we're going to pull off the clutch slave cylinder. And we'll start from there. I had a friend of mine several years ago show me this great trick. If you got a nut on a line that will not come off, this was once a 10 millimeter. You can see it's partially stripped. If you have a great big pair of channel locks, you can stick it on here the correct way. It takes 2 hands, but you can get the nut broken loose. Then take your wrench and take it off the rest of the way. And if you're really worried about it, you can take your file or grinder and file all these down and make this a different size. But that's not necessary for what we're doing here. All right, got the shift cables out, motor mount nuts out. We can drop this transmission now. Oh, wait a minute. Probably should take off the wheels and pull the axles first before we try to drop the transmission. Probably a good idea to look for any electrical wires that we're gonna end up pulling on or pulling out. Also any rubber hoses that might be in the way before we actually drop this transmission. I always like to use a method though of just drop it and we'll see what happens. We'll disconnect stuff as it gets hung up, but that's not always the best way to do it, especially when the car's your daily driver and you have to get it back on the road today. So there's a lot of folks that talk about this groove in here. Usually you dent the axle nut to keep it in place. I don't worry about that too much, as long as you got the right socket, which I had to buy special last time because I didn't have it. This is a 30 millimeter axle nut, and as long as you got an impact strong enough, that sucker just comes right off. So what we found on these axle nuts was one side's a 16 point 30 millimeter and the other side required a 34 millimeter. So some young hot rodder probably used whatever he had lying around to put this thing together. Next thing I'm looking at is, you can see the axle boot there is pretty torn up. I got some new axles for this, so we're definitely going to be replacing those. Alright, so something else to be aware of on these cars that are extremely lowered. This has what I was told were TRD lowering springs, which are supposed to make the car pretty low, and it is very low. In order to correct that, one of the previous customizers, when you lower the car, it probably had a ton of negative camber on the front. That's where the front wheel sits way in like this. So in order to correct that, we put a smaller bolt in right here, one of the previous technicians, and pulled the top of this out to try and make up for some of that. The car still had, I believe, 3 degrees of negative camber on both front wheels, which is quite a bit. Got the strut assembly off. Strut, hub, wheel bearing, which, by the way, I think this needs a new wheel bearing. Got that off of one side. We've now got the rack out. All right, just got the last bolt out, holding the transmission in. I had to pull the starter, and we had a fantastic bolt right here that would not come out. How heavy do you think this is?
Yeah.
Well, I don't have another jack.
Yeah.
I'll just have to,
I'll
have to drop it on my chest. I'll catch it. As long as I don't catch it with my head, should be okay, right?
Yeah.
Oh, hey. There we go. Mission accomplished.
That's what we're replacing.
All right, next thing to come off is the clutch plate, pressure plate. Oh man, that is wedged down there too. I'm gonna position my head right under here, so when this comes flying off, it'll hit me right in the melon. So generally resurfacing the flywheel, you want to pull it off, take it to a shop, get it done so it's nice and flat. They get rid of all these hard spots in here. So the new plates sit on there, spin nice, it's smooth, but I gotta get this done today. I don't have time to take it to a shop, so I was looking for a grinding disc or sander. This is what I found is a, what is this, a 40 grit flat wheel, flap wheel that is very used. I think this will be all right. All right, oh, nice and smooth. So this is what we got. My cheap Amazon clutch. There's a new throwout bearing. There is a pilot tool with a bearing on it, and it looks like on this car there's no bushing in the end of the crank, and there's no place for, there's only splines on the end of the transmission, so I'm guessing that's what you need to align the clutch somehow. That bearing is supposed to go in there. And then we have the new pressure plate and clutch plate. So let's put this together and do some burnouts. Take the bolts. I'm sure there's torque specs on these, but I don't know what they are. Usually the torque specs are tight enough so they don't fall off and loose enough so they don't break or come out again. So I don't remember which side goes to the flywheel side, but I know this, if I put this on like this, there's a gap here. So it doesn't go on like that. This has got to go in like this. All right, so I've sprayed both the pressure plate and clutch down. I normally have these coated with oil. So, oh man. So I sprayed it all down. I got a nice cut. That brake cleaner really does not feel good. Perfect. Right on there. I'd use a bigger hammer, but that's unfortunately the smallest one I have. Huh, I seem to be short a bolt. Oh, there it is. So this is the part that I hate the most. Now this is where we gotta pick the transmission up and reattach it to the engine. This thing weighs probably 150 pounds. It's not exactly light. Maybe 200 pounds, I don't know. It's pretty heavy. It's best to do with some kind of crane or hoist or jack or something. But we're gonna have to use what we got. So I'm gonna try to pick it up and stab it in. Attempt number 1. 2. Attempt number 3.
Not find the hole on there. I just take a break. Take a break for a minute. So, the bolts for this, I have strategically placed right under where I'm lying down. All right, attempt number 4. Nope.
Take your time.
All right, attempt number 5.
Feel with your feet.
There we go.
Attempt number 8.
Well, there's
What are you doing?
at least 2 threads holding that in. I don't think it's gonna fall on me. Ouch! Just got hit in the eyeball with an ABS sensor.
You want me to leave these in front of the garage?
The custom racing bumper. Actually, got to put the lights in here. The whole bumper comes off. It's very high performance-y. Put the racing screws in for the racing bumper. Nice custom lightweight self-tapping sheet metal screws. Just like factory. All right, it's all together. Let's see if it's gonna start. Very good. We gotta take it for a test drive. Driving this car is it's an experience. It's like a constant communication with the car. You are just bathed in the engine, the noise from the engine, the noise from the transmission, the rattles at the back of the car, the exhaust. The exhaust pops and barks just like a Group B rally car. The lowered suspension and the tires on the front, the car, this particular car will tend to want to veer off to the right or left, or decide it's making a left turn. So you've got to be on your game all the time, focused on what's going on. But every time I get into this car, I can't help but smile. I just love driving it. I got some future plans to hopefully make it a little bit better. If you like seeing videos like this, hit that subscribe button and the bell notification. Also give the video a thumbs up. As far as the future of this car, I've got several plans, and you're just going to have to tune back in to see.